They were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not but be drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, leave me, run like you never run before.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby Blog. I am Cammy Black. Welcome once again. Welcome everybody in the Central Belt area. You should be inside your homes now. I think that's the advice.
Not quite yet. We've got one last hurrah before the pubs close. So basically, I think the advice is get on it large before the pubs close, right?
I think that's always the thing that amuses me about these things. It's like from tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's like, like, you've got 24 hours notice to go and enjoy yourselves.
Well,
in big crowds.
Friday at 6, so it's just after work on Friday. Sadly, the pubs will close. So I think basically they're just encouraging people to do a Thursday night out and then have a hangover Friday at work. So.
Well, everyone's working from home anyway,
well, exactly.
So,
I know it's ideal, really.
Turn the camera off on the Zoom call.
That's it. Yeah. Oh no, I missed that. Sorry. Beep.
Anyway, thank you very much, everyone who's joined us live tonight. We've got people watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. You can find us on there. If you go to the blog, scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, and you go to the podcast page, that will tell you where you can find us to watch us live. You can also get involved in the comments live. So as we broadcast this, and we'll pop up any questions you've got on the screen and do our best to answer them. We've got a fair bit to get through tonight because I always think when we plan these, and we've delayed it by 24 hours, I'll explain why in a minute. We've only got a bit to talk about, and then all the news happens somehow within a day. So we didn't know that there was going to be additional lockdown measures announced today. We delayed for 24 hours for two reasons. One, my child has to self-isolate. Now, how you do that with a 3-year-old, I don't know. We're all fine. We're allowed. Officially, we're all allowed to leave the house. He's not. So we've got that going on here, and also we were kind of waiting to see when the Scotland squad was going to be announced. We understand, although it's next week from what we understand. We don't know when. We understand it's next week, so we've decided to do the podcast tonight. If you want to send us a message, if you're not listening to this live and you want to get involved, we're on Twitter at Scott Rugby Blog. I'm at Cammy Black. We're on Facebook, Scottish Rugby Podcast. We're on Instagram, Scottish Rugby Podcast. I'm mainly on there to stalk rugby players, to be honest, because that's the only way we find out about what they're doing outside of rugby these days. You can also email podcast at scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, and you can subscribe to our Patreon. You get ad-free episodes of the podcast. You get bonus podcast episodes. We're going to try and commit to putting out at least one bonus podcast episode a month. This month, you're going to get a few, at least two. I've got a very good question from Alec McDonald I'm going to come to in a minute. We're doing this month on the blog, we're looking for Scotland's hardest player. So there is a really good article on David Bedell Sivrite. I think I've got that right on the blog. I'm sure I've got his name wrong.
Close enough.
Luke Upton's written a book on the rugby hard men, which is well worth the read. That's coming out in a week. And he's featured a Scottish player who's also British and Irish Lions, and he's done a wee article on that for us on the blog to launch it. That's who Luke thinks is the hardest Scottish player of all time. We're going to do our own search, and after this, John and I are going to be recording a wee kind of exclusive podcast just to chat about some of the criteria, who might be in, who might be out early doors.
Yeah, a little preamble to, a prologue, if you will, to set the scene.
Whet the appetite. So yes, we'll be looking for your nominations in the comments section, and we'll try and put together a list by the end of October. So past and present players who are the hardest. So for £3 a month, you get the Richie Vernon Thunderdome. That gets you everything through the Patreon, ad-free episodes and exclusive content. For £5, you get your name read out on the podcast. That's it. You get into the Dougie Donnelly members lounge. Now, nobody has paid us £5 since last week. We've had a couple of new subscribers. Hello to them. But they're not getting the name read out because they didn't pay the extra £2.
£2, guys.
You could do what one guy did, which was come in at £5 and then immediately drop his subscription to £3 after that.
Just to get his name read out.
But I don't care because we got his £2.
Legend.
That's banked.
Legend.
That's spent on this lovely new microphone. That's fine.
Name and shame.
Very quickly from Alan McDonald. Now, this is an interesting question. He says, which player will have us checking Wikipedia? Now, this is because, of course, we edited Nick Haning's Wikipedia last time there was a squad announcement and it made it into the Telegraph. I'm sure journalists will have an eagle eye on Wikipedia and will, fool me once, shame on me. No, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Just shame on me, folks.
Shame on me. That's it. So no, I cannot endorse Wikipedia editing. That's a very cruel thing to do to hardworking journalists.
That's what your lawyer told you to say.
I'm sticking to that. The news tonight that we alluded to at the start of the podcast is there was a delay announced earlier this week in announcing the kind of future of domestic rugby in Scotland. That was due to start on the 31st of October. They were due to talk about it this week, but that got put back. There has now been an announcement by the Scottish Government this evening that confused a lot of people. Now, that I've double-checked it before we've come on. So all contact sport, including training for non-professional teams, is banned in the Central Belt.
That's correct, yeah.
Everyone thought it was the whole of Scotland, but it's just the Central Belt.
Yep.
Pubs and bars are also not allowed to serve indoors at all. Is that right, in the Central Belt?
For the next 16 days from Friday.
16 days, yeah. So there's a lot of clubhouses.
16 days is such a random number, isn't it?
I know.
Like 14's fine. 16's weird. It's like,
does it just cover 3 weekends?
It must
do 16.
It must.
That must be what they're thinking.
Aye, that's exactly what it'll be actually. Yeah, because that'll take us to the following Monday. So that's what it'll be.
That'll be just try and get 3 weekends out of the way. But it's a shame. It's a shame because clubhouses have had to close, and I think that's been a bit of a revenue stream and a bit of a lifeline for some clubs. So it's a shame that they've had to close. Now, I don't understand. I mean, I'm assuming even if they stop serving alcohol and food, they'd still. Yeah, Alan McDonald says 3 weekends. He's done the maths. He's a doctor. He can do maths. He can work stuff out.
Sir Dr. Allen has figured it out.
Has worked that out for us. Yeah, I think it includes. Well, the cafes, unlicensed premises which don't have alcohol license will be able to open between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. I assume it's having an alcohol license is going to cause problems. Otherwise, you've got that. It's like that episode of The Simpsons. If you open your clubhouse and pretend to be a cafe, you get raided as a speakeasy.
I remember attending, and I'm not going to mention the club for fear of getting them into trouble, but I remember attending a club when I was playing for, I believe it was Butte at the time, and they didn't have an alcohol license, but they did have a bar, and it was you entered a prize draw to win. So it was the cost of the drink to enter the prize draw, and you either won or lost, but it was play again if you lost till you got a beer as the prize.
What they should have done, now the way to do that is to say if you win, you get your choice of drink.
Yep.
If you lose, you have to drink whatever the bar
we pick.
Desperate to get rid of.
Diesel double Baileys.
So yeah, you can have the right. If you win, you get the choice of the bar. If you lose, you've got to have half a pint of Campari.
That's been there for 17 years.
Take your pick of the WKD Blues or the Bacardi Breezes. That's your choice if you lose.
See, it sounds really weird, but sometimes you just can't see past a wee Smirnoff Ice if you're feeling parched and you need a wee sugar boost. Just can't see past a wee Smirnoff Ice. Can you imagine this face, this beautiful, handsome boy drinking some Smirnoff Ice?
I see Smirnoff Ice is fine because if you're out dancing, I can attest that sugar. If you need a sugar rush, that's fine. But casually drinking in a bar, I'm not having Smirnoff Ice.
Let's not get into the story of the hooch.
I cannot endorse Ron Wilson's suggestion of a pint of tequila.
No. Dr. Sir Alan might have something to say about that as well.
Drink sensibly, folks. So the RFU have pushed their domestic season all the way back to January. It doesn't sound like there are imminent plans to do something similar in Scotland. Yes, they've stopped things in the Central Belt. I fully intended to come on tonight and say it sounds like we're going to go the way of the RFU. However, it sounds like they've pushed back the announcement because they knew there was an announcement from the Scottish Government coming. Yeah. Because they were being consulted. So let's see where we are. Stay safe, everybody. Keep your distance, wash your face, wash your hands.
It's what we've been saying throughout, isn't it? That it's, there has to be a degree of pragmatism about this and realism, and sadly the facts are the numbers are going up. The situation is getting worse, and you just need to see the programmes at the weekend, and let's face it, there's not much socially distancing that can be done in rugby, really, is there? No.
And you see, that's the other thing. You see, Edinburgh lost Jamie Ritchie. Yep. England have had to isolate a couple of players that have come into the England camp this week. Sale, Sharks. I've lost the entire squad.
Players
who did not go out and drinking to celebrate their Premiership Cup win and were not seen in Manchester University campus, according to Sale's own press release. Now, that's a weird thing to say in a press release, isn't it? It's a very specific thing to say. We were not, fair enough, we did not go out and celebrate in bars around Manchester. That's fine, but to say, especially not around the university campus, seems weirdly specific.
That very specific bar that absolutely we did not attend. Absolutely not. No. Look the other way. Yeah, fullbacks and wings.
That's all I'm going to say. Fullbacks and wings can isolate fairly easily. I think every fullbacks and wings have been isolating since the year dot in rugby.
That's the social distancing was made for fullbacks and wings.
That's it. Just you need to work. Everyone needs to work on the step when they're going to the night street. You should see that every negative. You should always see the opportunity
That's it.
And this is the opportunity. This is an opportunity to teach our youngsters, bring back stepping.
That's it. Yeah, no more Simone step. It's you've got to actually get a proper step on you now. Bounce 2 meters away. That'd be some step, wouldn't it? 2 meters gone. Not gonna happen.
No. So yeah, this is going to rumble on. Well, I think we'll probably end up talking about this during the autumn series of tests. I don't doubt that we'll lose players to have an isolate because they've been in contact with a member of the family who's been in contact with someone. So it's right that they take. It's right, everyone's taking the proper precautions, but realistically, we're probably going to end up with Daryl Marford in the front row by the last game.
Marford and Duncan Weir in this make the squad again.
Hey, let's not rule it out.
No.
That's the domestic season's been delayed. That's that. The pro question mark, as we're calling it, because we don't know how many teams are going to end.
I think that's valid.
Yeah. So 2 games at the weekend, neither particularly great by any stretch. We'll start with Glasgow. I mean, it's not. There's match reports on the blog if you want to go and read them. If you want to know what happened. There's not. It's the first game of the season. I think Glasgow probably, out of the 2 teams, Glasgow come out of this slightly better because they were away from home.
Yeah.
It's never easy to go to Connacht. The wind didn't seem an issue, so maybe the COVID was hanging around a bit.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
Couldn't
maybe
be blown away.
It couldn't be blown away. Yeah, I think that's possibly the issue we faced. We were a bit taken aback by that.
Planned for wind. You'd planned for wind, and none was there.
Yeah. Well, it would explain a lot actually, because so Adam Hastings had one of those Adam Hastings days. I don't know. I think we need to come up with a nickname for that type of day, because he does these days where he just forgets that there's other players in the team, and he takes the ball and he looks, and it's like he looks and goes, Stafford McDowell, it's Nick Grigg, nah, not today, boys. And he goes himself, and then he inevitably gets tackled and then ends up at the bottom of a ruck, and then we try and pass the ball to a forward and drop it. It's a strange tactic, and he does this occasionally, where he just does it all game, and until somebody finally tells him, "Look, Adam, just kick the ball, please." Not that he could manage that terribly well either. Did you see the miss in front of the posts?
Yep.
Poor Mossy simply said, "Wow, he's missed that," and it was like disappointed father.
That's literally the worst thing Chris Patterson has ever said in his life.
Just completely and utterly eviscerated him with a 3-letter word. Wow. Yeah, it was frustrating as well, because I'd spent a lot of time talking down Bundyaki and saying how rubbish he was, and he had one of those games where he seemed to just get on the end of a couple of things. He didn't cause Glasgow any great problems other than scoring 2 tries, but that makes him a hero. So
yeah. Adam Wastings.
The Wastings. Yeah, he's having a Wastings.
He's having a Wastings. We'll go with that.
I like it. I think that could fit.
It might sound cruel. We're going to talk about that in Hands in the Ruck. Someone's given us Hands in the Ruck about player criticism. We're going to touch on that later in Hands in the Ruck, so we can discuss the rights and wrongs of Adam Wastings later on. It's
not criticism. It's an understanding that perhaps he's not playing to the game plan that I can't understand the game plan, so therefore I feel the right to challenge it. I'm trying to understand what he's doing.
Can you understand the game plan, John? Can you see a Danny Wilson thing? Because you've had 3 games now, and I know that we call the 1872s dead rubbers. Well, you do. Yeah. But
the second one was fine. Second one was a proper hit out.
Yeah. So I mean, can you see a difference yet? 3 games in.
Honestly, yes and no. I can't see anything that resembles what I would say is a specific game plan from Danny Wilson, but I don't see any of the Rennie madness either. It's almost like we are a normal team. We just kind of looked like, see, if you were to play like if you were to describe a default rugby team and just go do some default rugby stuff, well, that's kind of what we looked like. And maybe that's what Danny Wilson's going to do. Does it necessarily fit with what we want from Glasgow, what we want from Scottish rugby? Probably not. Will it win us more games? Probably not. But it seems to be the direction of travel, is that we're kind of trying to be more pragmatic across the board in Scottish rugby. Certainly sparked by the Townsend, when the Tuesday clock was ticking ever closer, and we've went away from the fastest brand of rugby in the whole introverse.
I suppose we did our Tuesday clock thing at the start of the Six Nations, and there was a pragmatism to Scotland's play, but that did play out in the end, and you could see it starting to work and things starting to click. So I guess that's if Danny Wilson's coming in and doing something with Glasgow, and always kind of like strip everything away and not start again, but you start on the fundamentals. You can't just do the fundamentals long term, but as a short term, let's start here, and work our way through to a point where and build on that, which I don't think we necessarily understood. That's what Gregor Townsend was doing. Yes, at the start of the Six Nations, but by the end of it, I think he communicated that a lot better. That's what they were trying to do. That certainly started to come through in some of the press conferences, that there was a plan. And so looking back on, with the benefit of hindsight, some of those games you look back and think, actually, no, then there were narrow margins. That we were in that game in Ireland, we were in the Calcutta Cup. They felt sore at the time, and even the Italy game, as bad as it was a very workmanlike performance, and they came away with a win.
And that's the thing. You hear this a lot in football when they talk about Scottish football in particular, when the inevitable, a manager comes in and it's, we're going to get back to doing the basics. We're going to get back to doing the basics well, do smart things well, make the right decisions. And you don't often see that. It's interesting. You touch on Gregor Townsend maybe doing that kind of mid-tenure. And you could probably almost argue that the Rugby World Cup was almost the end of the era of the stupidity of fastest brand of rugby in the world. And we're moving into that more pragmatic approach. He's maybe kind of it's almost like he's a new coach in some ways, but he's not. He's still the same old Townsend. So I would expect there's going to be some level of madness comes in at some point. It might come in the shape of a 5'10" boy from Bridge of Allen, but who knows? Who knows? So yeah, it's strange, but I think we'll see how Wilson progresses. I think there's definitely an emphasis on the forward play. The set piece looked quite strong. Fraser Brown was throwing very well, despite the fact he's like 2 minutes in seemed to injure his elbow. His darts were pretty spot on, which the same can't be said across the road, sadly, which is a concern.
Yeah, let's talk about across the road then in Murrayfield. Edinburgh lost to Ospreys. And now, Ospreys are a bit of a sleeping giant in Welsh rugby. The Ospreys have had their issues over the past couple of years, but Ospreys have some very, they've got Justin Tipperick, they've got Alan Wynne-Jones. They've got very good players. I think they just suffered with the coaches that they've had.
Yep.
The fact that we've now got one as our forwards coach is no, one of their former ones is good, because that was the last time the Ospreys were any good. So there is that, and there is an element of, the Ospreys, I think, probably are due a bit of a bounce back longer term, and there's an element of that. But the thing Richard Cockerell has come out and said is there's a lack of natural leaders in Scottish rugby, which we've talked about before on the podcast and on the blog, and there's an article on the blog recently about that. But Richard Cockerell's been in charge for 3 seasons now. So if he's not picking natural leaders in his team at this point, that's on him.
Yep.
I think partly, and he did say, you read the content. There's a really good kind of bit on this on the offside line where they've quoted what Richard Cockrell said, and he said it's not meant to be anything he hasn't said to his players already. They know this is how he feels, and I don't necessarily think that he doesn't accept that it's a criticism of him either. But it surprises me that it's that should still be an issue. As much as given, you got Grant Gilchrist was playing, Stuart McInally was playing, both former Scotland captains. So if they aren't natural born leaders, then he needs to do something about that. And what he needs to do is he's going to have to promote one of the youngsters who are. He's going to have to make Jamie Ritchie a captain. He's going to have to make. Well, he made Magnus Bradbury a captain, and then Magnus Bradbury fell over and bashed his head open because he got drunk.
Yes. That's natural leadership in action, I think.
It is. To be fair, it is on a rugby night out.
Exactly. Yes. He's a leader of men when he does such actions on a rugby night out. Yes. You know, it is. It's a really strange one. It's a strange thing for Cockrell to come out and say. And again, you've got to wonder about. You know, he's saying it's not something. It's nothing I've not said to my players. You must be quite concerned if you're in the Edinburgh dressing room and that's the message you're getting. Like, none of yous are, and I'm sure there's other words in there, but none of yous are natural leaders. It's a bit strange. And as you say, he's had 3 seasons to address that. And yeah, right, you can say maybe first season, okay, you come in, you've got to get the lay of the land, you've got to understand who's there, you've got to clear out a lot of the
the guy was it the dead with the guys that are driving from one side of Murrayfield to the other to go to the training pitches.
Yeah, you've got to ban the driving from the training pitches. That's where your first season fine. By season 2, you're now into. You should be looking at leadership succession plans. You should be looking at who's going to be your leaders, who's going to be your captain for the next 5 seasons, who's going to be your stand-up go-to guys in these pressure situations that you hopefully will find yourself in. And then in season 3, he's found himself, or the end of season 2, in season 3, he's found himself losing playoffs, losing knockout matches from winnable positions. Mm-hmm. And that is on him. It has to be on him. Yeah, the players have let him down, but if there's no leaders out there, that is on him.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that team that played at the weekend. You got Hoyland. All right, he's in from the sevens as a bit of a stopgap kind of fullback cover. Darcy Graham, Bennett, Christine, Jamie Farndale, Van der Vault, Charlie Shield, Pierre Schumann, Stuart McInally, Simon Bergen, world's fittest prop, of course, Ben Tools, Grant Gilchrist, Magnus Bradbury, Luke Crosby, and Nick Hainan. Now, I kind of take his point. I mean, amongst those names, I mean, Gilchrist and McInally, they've been captains before. They've been found wanting, and they would admit that themselves before we start getting any angry letters. So there isn't anybody within there, and I think that the problem he has is he's trying to pick his best team.
Yep.
And I think at some point you have to. Your best team isn't necessarily always made out of your best players. If you need a leader in there and they aren't the best in that position, then you need to weigh up what they add in leadership to what you lose by not playing the guy that's better than him.
Yeah. There's also an element of what is he actually talking about in terms of leadership? Because obviously, we both work in different areas. The leadership comes in many different shapes and sizes, and we've both been in dressing rooms where you've seen captains doing the punching holes in the walls, and captains sitting with a clipboard analysing things and then saying nothing during the game, but leading by example. And there's different types of leadership, and if he's wanting a blood and snotters player to go and grab people by the throat and shout at referees, then you would imagine that's what he's looking for based on the type of culture he created at Leicester. But he's got those players. They exist. You've got your Jamie Ritchies. I would say Crosby's one of those players. You could, set him loose on anyone and they'd be quite scared, really. If he's not getting that from them, then, you need to be looking elsewhere.
I mean, he seems to be talking about it's players that make the right decisions at the right time and players that can gather the troops around at the back of the, at the posts when you're down, when you're scored down and say, right, let's just stick up the jumper for a bit. Let's just cool heads. Let's just listen to what the referee's telling us for a little bit and not be daft. Let's, just get back control, go through the phases.
It's concerning though, if that's what he's looking for, he's put out almost an international front eight.
Yeah,
that's what you're looking at them for. You guys have played international rugby. You've played at the highest level. How are you not able to just say, right, boys, calm it down. Let's just take a minute. Let's get back in this game. It is startling if that's the case. And, it's, yeah.
I think probably really the solution for Edinburgh has got to be that he brings somebody in, an experienced player. And Glasgow have had some success with this in the past. I think, whether you bring in a very experienced player who's been successful in their career, you probably get them cheap, someone in their 30s who will come in and do that job, even if they're not captain, whether they're co-captain or Callum Gibbons is a good example, I think, of someone that did that very successfully at Glasgow. Very successful guy in New Zealand, came in and filled that role.
Set a culture.
Yep, set the culture, brought in, had found himself in positions where they needed to make games and had that experience. And I think if it's not coming from within Scotland, he needs now to look outside of Scotland, bring somebody in who can mentor their younger players. I think the time's come for, Grant Gilchrist and Stuart McInally's time has come and gone to be captain of Edinburgh in Scotland.
Yes.
You need to be looking at the Crosbys and the Bradburys to become captain now.
Or Jamie Ritchie.
Or Jamie Ritchie. I think the only issue I would say with Jamie Ritchie compared to, and this isn't any slight on Magnus Bradbury because he's there or thereabouts for the Scotland squad, is that you lose. I can see with Edinburgh and Glasgow there is merit in choosing having co-captains. So you could have Jamie Ritchie as a captain, but Jamie Ritchie's going to play 6 games a season for Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Given Scotland enough. Commitments, so you need someone, and I think that's what he did with Fraser McKenzie for a while. But I don't think Fraser McKenzie was of that caliber that he's looking for. But you need someone like your Cullies who are there every week, playing and leading.
It is the benefit of having that non-Scots qualified captain. Absolutely, and it was a very, very shrewd move. I've criticised Dave Rennie a couple of times over the last wee while, but it was a really shrewd move. Getting, I think he knew what he was getting when Cully came over, but most of us didn't. We knew we were getting a decent New Zealander. We tend to get bad New Zealanders. Oh well, right, here we go. But we hadn't really known just the level of leadership that he would bring, and having him alongside a Ryan Wilson to kind of calm Batman's craziness was really useful. And I think it has benefited even Ryan Wilson's captain still. I was listening to the Glasgow podcast recently, and Ryan Wilson was talking quite eloquently about the role of captain and what it means to captain Glasgow and the sort of responsibilities that come with it. So yeah, it's a tough one though. It's a really tough one because again, you're not going to be able to go out and get in this climate. Get the SRU are having to try and avoid making redundancies. You're not going to be able to get necessarily the funds to go and cherry pick a leader from somewhere.
No, and you're not necessarily going to have the funds to go and get a leadership consultant to come in either. But
no, we would do it for free.
We would do. John, that's what we run. We'll run a Zoom on Zoom.
That's it. Yeah, yep. I've got some stuff from. I'm actually doing a leadership course at work, so I've actually got some stuff I could use.
I've got loads of stuff I've done. I've delivered training on stuff, so we'll, me and John together, we'll do that. So you've got our address, guys. Send it to us.
Yes, you do.
You send it to us, and we'll sort you out with some. We'll tell you that.
As always.
I don't. In terms of the Scotland squad, then I don't think anyone's put their hands up necessarily this week for inclusion. I think probably, if anything, the case for Finn Russell coming back in is a little bit stronger
Yes.
after Adam Hastings and Jaco van der Vaart showing it. It's not like either of them kind of have stuck their hand up to say you can leave him in Paris for another couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I think if Townsend has watched back the coverage, I think he possibly was doing a Zoom call with Finn as he was watching back the coverage, going, "So, buddy, yes, yeah, 4 pints, yeah, absolutely, have 5."
I'll have them. I'll have that. We'll leave the minibar open.
Yes, yeah, you can put it on my tab. Allegedly. Yeah, so no, it's. I think in terms of players putting their hands up, it was really difficult. The conditions in the Edinburgh game were really poor, but there was so little rugby played that it was really difficult to see anyone. Darcy Graham looked sharp as a tack, though. Again, he was the only real bright spot for Edinburgh, I thought. Over at Glasgow, Hugh Jones went again good at fullback. Again, got a try this time. Cut some really nice lines. Good kicking game. Caught out of position now and then, but apparently we know that's not a big issue for Scottish fullbacks. So we just. So no, I think he done really well. Other than that, yeah, fairly quiet on the old selection front. I think the cries for getting maybe a Mark Bennett back into the Scotland fold will have quietened down a wee bit. He was particularly poor, I thought, in the Edinburgh match. Couple of really poor sort of cover situations where he's let his man go, which again, if you're doing that at club level, it's criminal. Do it at international level, you'll get hate mail. So no, it's it's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't think we're expecting any surprises next week.
No, we say that every time, though.
I know, and then someone comes up. So, I mean, the 3 South African qualified players, and Pierre Schumann's not there yet, despite what I think you said on radio in Glasgow last week, John.
Yeah, probably, yeah. No, I was meaning Ollie Kebble was about to become.
So you're going to get Ollie Kebble, Jaco van der Vaart, and Duhan van der Merwe. They're going to be in there, and you're going to get the normal. There is going to be an element of who dat from people who just follow Scottish Rugby at national time, and that's not I'm not meaning anything by that, because we've established before, it is fine if all you do is watch Scottish Rugby when the internationals are on. I haven't got an issue with that, because plenty of people follow Scottish Rugby elsewhere. You don't have to just follow the pro teams, but there is always an element of, who's he? Yes. I don't know him, and that's fine. But that's probably going that I think those would be the 3 main candidates for that this time round. Yeah. Can't think that you might get Callum Hunt-Hill, you might get somebody from England, an English-based Scottish player, called
somebody with a granny somewhere, or a mummy or a daddy from north of the border, but that we've not heard of or seen much.
Glasgow have signed a South African schoolboy.
We have, yes.
Jordan Venter's best mate.
Jordan Venter's best mate, yes. De Bruyne.
And according to his mum, he's got a Scottish granddad.
Oh!
His mum must have been name searching on Twitter, like all good mums do, to like the tweets and take it up with the haters as well. But she replied to someone said, "I wonder if he's Scottish qualified," and she said I think she's English and her dad was a very proud Scot, so he's going to be joining the academy apparently.
Yes, he is the long rumoured to be announced. We had I think there's 14 places in each academy that were aligned to Glasgow and Edinburgh, and Glasgow had a TBA for 14, and we were wondering if that was the name of our new Fijian winger, but it turns out no, it was actually just to be confirmed or to be announced. So yeah, good. He looks a decent prospect. I'm watching the highlights. He looks he had a very Hugh Jones style about him. Yeah. Actually, I thought kind of initially, I thought initially his running style was very Sean Maitland in the way he was kind of ghosting. Didn't look like he was travelling very fast, but seemed to be going faster than everyone else, which you can do at schoolboy
which is
level.
always good, yeah.
But then, yeah, very Hugh Jones.
Yeah, and there's I think he's been kind of mentioned in dispatches from a couple of South African kind of blogs about as one to watch for the future. So it's all very encouraging. I don't think there's anything more to do on the squad announcement. We'll pick that up next week when it happens. One thing that was of interest, now this doesn't necessarily concern Scottish rugby as such, but the Premier 15s, which is the women's top level in England, which there are rumours that there might be Scottish and Welsh teams joining that in the not too distant future. There's been some amendments to their rules, and it's quite interesting what they're proposing. They are going to give more free kicks from knock-ons, so they're going to try and take down the number of scrums per game.
Yep.
So more advantages played for knock-ons, free kicks rather than scrums for forward passes, players prevented from joining mauls if they were not in the original line-out, and most controversially, matches reduced to 35 minutes a half. Now, what's interesting to me is there is something in some of those rules
yes.
that short or long term could work. I mean, free kick for a forward pass. I don't have an issue with that.
No, yeah. If we're looking for a way to get the game moving, get the game restarted, it gives you the option of either a tap or a kick to touch, but you don't get regain possession from the kick to touch. I have no issue with that. The other one was I quite like the idea was that players prevented from joining mauls if they were not part of the original lineup. I think that's really good. I like that. Sounds really good. Yeah, and you could find yourself. It could open up some really interesting possibilities around, putting 8, 10, 13 men and women in the mall, or the lineup could end up like a train, or
it's Wales, Australia, where Wales put 15 men in the lineup and failed to score from them all.
Yeah. Gatland's Wales. He'd done it with Ireland as well when he was there. And he failed that time as well.
So that was interesting. One to watch there, whether or not those becoming they're partly there, I think, for COVID related reasons.
Yeah,
but whether or not longer term they become a thing. We haven't got any Where's Dougie Donnelly's this week, sadly. Nobody, but everyone's on lockdown, and no one's. I don't think we will be getting any either.
Yeah, Dougie's away. He's away in hiding. Locked down in his wine cellar. Just loving lockdown.
So with that, we are going to move on and we're going to do this. Yes, it is Hands in the Ruck. This is our Any Other Business section of the podcast. We've got to Hands in the Ruck in 45 minutes, John.
This is like record-breaking for us. There's been a serious lack of cow chat. There's been no crisps mentioned, no chocolate. Nobody's mentioned the unicorn behind your head.
No, now this is nobody has mentioned the unicorn behind my head. There's a floating unicorn behind my head. It's my co-host for this week. It's been my daughter's birthday, so we've got balloons in the place for our podcast.
See, in the opening credits, you could only see the hair of the unicorn, and it sort of looked a bit like the Demigorgon out of Stranger Things behind you. I was a bit confused.
Yes.
So Finn the co-host.
Finn the glorious unicorn co-host. I've got to figure out which way to go there. There he is.
Go that way. Yeah, there we go.
All his glory. And we've had a couple of Hands in the Ruck this week. So the one we had, it was on the DMs. So I don't know. We didn't really got the message, and we didn't really check whether or not they wanted us to read the name out. So I'm not going to check who it was, the name. But somebody approached us to say that they'd been banned, I think, from a Facebook group because they had been critical of a player. Now, the person who contacted us said that is a particular rule of that particular forum.
Yes.
There are reasons for it because there are family members of the players in there and some players themselves. And the purpose of the forum, I think, is more of a social, let's all get together and have a wee chat about what's going on with that particular club.
Yes, that's right.
That's fine. I think that's and the person who commented on, who contacted us kind of accepted as much and said that's fine. They got that. But they put the question to us is, where do you draw the line with criticism of players and coaches? I suppose. I mean, we did the Tuesday clock, didn't we? Which is
let's see how this pans out and see how well that's aged, shall we?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I mean, I think that the cardinal rule is you never tag a player in your criticism, because that's like going up to somebody in a pub and screaming abuse in their face. I think
it's nonsense. Yeah,
that's not done. You say anybody that's going to do that's a sociopath. However, I think beyond that, to me, anything's fair game, because to me, the rule is: would you say it in a stadium? Would you say it in a clubhouse?
Yes.
And if you'd say it in a clubhouse, or you'd say it in a stadium, or you'd scream it at them on the pitch, it's fine. Now, unfortunately, some players, I think Stuart Hogg's admitted to this, will name search. And I understand that they will do that, just because it gets after the game. They want to see how they've done. And I could understand that it would be upsetting seeing criticism and people slagging you off, but it's no different, I don't think, to what you would hear shouted at you from the side from pitch side. No. I don't want to say it's an acceptable part of the game. It's always been part and parcel of the game. We just have social media now.
Yeah, it's kind of an extension of it, isn't it? I think if we're going to look for kind of, where do you draw the line? Where are the rules? I think you have to keep it. So I regularly criticise players on here. I regularly criticise players on social media, but it's back to that thing we talked about. You're criticising their performance. I'm not saying so Adam Hastings, for me, now I'm not a rugby coach, I'm not a professional rugby anything. I come on here and talk nonsense about rugby occasionally, but for me as a fan, he had a bad game, and I think it's fair that I can say I think he had a bad game. I'm not saying he's a horrible person. I'm not saying his teeth are bad or anything, because they're not. They're magnificent. But, the fact is he had a crap game. And I'm allowed to say that. And he might disagree. But the facts are that fine well he won't disagree, because he doesn't need someone like me saying you've had a rubbish game, because he's got professional coaches telling him, Adam, you could have done better. And he'll know himself. He'll be his own biggest critic. So, I appreciate the point around family. And family, it can be quite hard for family to see their loved ones getting criticised by anonymous people on the internet. That's difficult. But that is part and parcel of being famous, sadly, in this culture we live in. And these guys are famous in that they have a privileged position as role models, as representatives of our country and of our clubs, of our regions, and it comes with the territory. And I don't like it, but it does.
No, I think as long as it's not, like you said, as long as it's not racist abuse or I don't know, but even then, I think not even then. I mean, other kinds of abuse. I think you would get it screamed at you in a stadium.
Yes,
and I think it's unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. Social media is, has good sides to social media as well. But that's all it's done is it's taken that stuff from the stadium and put it online, and there's not really any difference to someone in capital letters shouting, Adam Hastings was gash. As long as he doesn't kind of tag him into that, so that it goes directly that he's mentioned, then that's fine. I think the I think from our point of view, we always try to be constructive in our criticism of players, but also, we try to be entertaining as well. And sometimes that will involve us, having callbacks and repeated criticisms for laughs and for a wee bit of a giggle, and maybe that might come across as cruel sometimes. It's not the intention to kind of single players out. I mean, we've had our kind of running jokes about Ryan Wilson and stuff like that over the years, but
Ross Ward got a bit of running jokes from me. Had to issue an apology.
But there's that, there is all that, we try and be fair, but also we try and be funny with it as well. So sometimes it might feel like it oversteps the mark, but I think my starting point is I can play rugby to the standard that they can play rugby.
That's it,
but that doesn't mean that we can't have a laugh at their expense and be a wee bit critical as well, because we're fans, and that's what fans do at the end of the day.
And to be honest, see, if they wanted to mention us on their podcast and have a laugh at us and say those two jokers, the guy with the unicorn behind him and the baldy guy with the mad guitars, that's fine as well. It's all a laugh.
Do you know what? Let's come out in my hands in the ruck now, John. Now you mention us on their podcast. It was World Podcast Day last week, John.
Yes, it was. Yes. I wonder where this is going, Cam.
If we'd had any sense, we would have broadcast on World Podcast Day. This shows how poorly planned we are.
Shows a lot about us.
It does. We just don't know. Who knew there was a World Podcast Day?
I know, right? I didn't.
So, Scottish Rugby put out a wee tweet about a wee article, in fact, about World Podcast Day. And it was, entitled, if you've not got into podcasts, now's the time to get into podcasts. So, of course, understandably, top of the list, Scottish Rugby Official Podcast, which has to be called the Scottish Rugby Official Podcast because we are the Scottish Rugby Podcast, of course. The Edinburgh Podcast, Behind the Castle or Inside the Castle? Outside the castle? On top of the castle?
Through the castle.
Past the tree on the right towards the castle, and you'll find it there at the end of the road.
Done by Burger King next to the castle.
We've got the Warriors Podcast.
Warriors Weekly.
Warriors Weekly, of course. And then there was Under the Sticks, which I understand is associated with the Pro 14, but isn't the official Pro 14 podcast.
Yes.
So that's the Pro 14 have set it up, but it is not the official Pro 14 podcast. And then there was the Guinness Six Nations Fantasy League podcast, which hasn't had an episode out since January. And yet there are two, and I'll point this up. There's podcast charts are meaningless in essence. They don't really tell you an awful lot. Mostly they're kind of like done by algorithms. It does not done on actual numbers of downloads. But there is ways of kind of finding out where you are on these things. And in the rugby charts, we don't do too badly, John. We're top 10 all time.
Yes.
In the rugby charts, along with the Thistle lads as well. They're a couple ahead of us because they've been going for. I think they're going about 6 months longer than us.
Yep.
And in between us is the official one. Now, we know our place. We're not. But at the same time, we birthed pinball.
We did.
We gave the world sandbags, did we not?
We did.
We edited. Finsanity. We Finnocent. We edited Nick Haning's Wikipedia entry. All these things we have gifted to the world of Scottish rugby, and yet, do we get a mention on World Podcast Day for people wanting to get into podcast? No.
We even mentioned Ovaltine and cows, and
we did. Yeah. And point of order: cows do drink their own milk.
Yes.
And they can drink Ovaltine as well. I think I read this week. I was
I was discussing it with a couple of people this week, and I believe that Ovaltine would be an interesting choice for a cow.
Ovaltine, that's the other thing we found out. Ovaltine aids lactation, so in fact, it would be a very good thing to give to a cow.
Yes. So farmers everywhere, if there's any farmers watching, feel free. You can have that one for free.
You can, yeah.
Yeah. If you want to tag me, if you want to be like, look, here is my cow drinking Ovaltine, I would accept that. I'm down with that.
The other hands in the now, luckily this got submitted by somebody else, so I could have my World Podcast day rant. This was from Baldy Pete. He said his hands in the ruck. He said, "I'm sure you'll cover this anyway." Well, I was going to, but thank you very much, Baldy Pete, for giving us a chance to cover this. He said, "Exeter's new strip is just taking the Michael."
Yes.
Now, for regular listeners to the podcast, we've covered this in Hands in the Ruck before. The Exeter Chiefs logo, not the name, because the name's fine. It's Chiefs. The issue is the logo and the fact it's a Native American, First Nation, Indian representation. It's not appropriate. It's cultural appropriation. They have no ties with Native American people or First Nations people of America. The Washington Redskins aren't even the Washington Redskins anymore. This is a live issue, and a number of Exeter fans, a large number of Exeter fans, want them to change the branding. Their suggestion is you do a Celtic chief, which I think is a good suggestion because it ties them with Cornwall. So this week, Exeter released their third strip, which had 2 gigantic reproductions of the logo on the shirt.
Yes.
So it's pretty much doubling down. And all through, the other thing that obviously people were unhappy about, the fans have a chant called the Tomahawk Chop, which is pretty at best insensitive. And obviously there's no fans at Exeter games, but Exeter have insisted on carrying on piping that out anytime there's a live game. So they really are doubling down on it, and that's a shame. Now, we mentioned Exeter Chiefs in passing in our last episode. We didn't really discuss it seriously, did we, John?
No, I don't think so. No,
just a passing reference.
It was like literally just a
we referred them as racist Exeter Chiefs, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a very flippant comment in amongst a lot of other nonsense that we spoke, but it was accurate.
Nobody pull us up on the cows chat, but
no, exactly, yeah, or as Joe rightly points out in the comments, the salmon fiddling from a couple. Have you been touched by a salmon?
Have you been affected by any issues in tonight's podcast? We can give you the line to call for if you're
it's one of our stranger.
Are you a salmon that's been interfered by an ex-MSP and head of social media?
That's right. That's where we'd went with
it. That's the salmon fiddling.
Yeah, it's coming back to me now.
Yeah, but back to Exeter. We suddenly had a lot of comments on the blog from people pulling us up on the fact we call them the racist Exeter Chiefs, saying it's not really racist. And if you start to call it racist, then you undermine the meaning of the word racism. Now, grey is grey. There's dark greys, there's light greys, there's, very bad racism and there's little bad racism. This probably sits towards the kind of like, it's still racism, but it's not as bad as really bad racism. It's still racism. It's still cultural appropriation. And I think some of the comments, were of the nature of, well, nobody's complained from... nobody who's affected has complained. It's just one person in Bath. It's just somebody in Wales, some white woman in Wales complaining, and that's fundamentally not true. If you look online, there are plenty of people who are affected by the issue who have spoken out about this. There are psychological studies done into the effect that cultural stereotyping has had on Native American and First Nation communities in America. This is a very big issue. This isn't just, something that somebody in a lot, a couple of woke podcasters are moaning on about every week. This is, this is a real serious issue. And so we did ban people from the comments this week because it was ill-informed, I think, some of the debate, and a quick Google would have solved it. So we don't mind informed debate within the comments. I'm not going to debate whether or not it's racism or not, because ultimately the blog's our platform and we'll use it how we want, and we'll choose who posts on it and who doesn't. If you want to go and have that, go to Twitter, go to Facebook, and they'll moderate you. But we're open to debate, but some debates are not debates, and I'm not going to debate the rights and wrongs of a little bit of racism, because it's still racism at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's not like we've made any secret of how we feel about this. It's not like it should be of any surprise to anyone that we feel that it clearly is racist, and whether it's a little bit racist or a little bit racist doesn't actually matter. It's racism, and it's insensitive, it's stupid, it's just in 2020, it's quite sad and sickening, really. And the fact that people try to defend it, again, I think sometimes people just like to be controversial. They like to be, it's the anti-establishment, or everybody thinks this is racist, so I'm going to think it's not. But it's just pathetic.
Yes, I think that's where we are with it. So, someone's asked, do you think they should ban the Simpsons impersonation of groundskeeper Willie?
Well, I mean, there's stereotypes, and there's a certain cultural insensitivity to it. I think it comes down to whether are Scottish people offended by it. Is there a collective of Scottish people standing up and saying, do you know what, actually this really offends me, and I think we shouldn't be portrayed like this? I don't think there is at the moment. Maybe sometime soon there will be, and if there is, then it seriously has to be talked about and considered. But for the moment, I don't believe there is a groundswell of opinion that we should ban groundskeeper Willie. I'm happy to be corrected if that's the case.
Yes, yeah, but it is, like we said, it's a live, real issue. There's a really good podcast. If anyone that listens to the Blood and Mud podcast, and if you don't, do go and look this episode out. Lee interviewed 2 women from the Iroquois Rugby project, which is based in Canada, and so they've used rugby as a way of, they take rugby out to First Nations communities in Canada, and they spoke very eloquently about the impact that the Exeter Chiefs decision had on them. They spoke about the fact that they had written to Exeter Chiefs and had not had a reply. I think to be fair, I think if Exeter Chiefs had reached out to these communities and said, look, we've adopted this for what are good reasons, and I think that, they probably did have good reasons at the start. If they reached out to those communities and said, we've adopted this for good reasons, we now realize that maybe it's a bit insensitive, but what we'd like to do is to keep it and to help you and maybe have ties with you or something. Yeah. That could be a way around it. With permission, we'd like to do this, and we'd like to support what you're doing in return. That would probably be okay, I think. Yeah,
it would be more okay.
Yeah, it would be more okay than it is. One comment we had is, well, are we calling for Sam Skinner, Johnny Gray, and Stuart Hogg to be banned from the Scotland team? It's difficult, that one. I think. I don't think there's a straightforward answer to it. It puts us in an uncomfortable position.
Yep.
But I think they're equally in an uncomfortable position in that this is their employers.
Yeah. That's the thing. It comes back to we all have choice when it comes to who employs us, and we all have the ability to screen our employer based on their morals or thereof lack of. And we have all worked for companies who have maybe not had quite as good morals. I particularly have a couple of good ones in my back catalogue. For further details, see my published works. But I also have a couple of good companies in my, and it's a case of, you can choose who you work for, and obviously when you're working for them, it's more difficult to come out and criticise them. But if your choice of employer then impacts the brand of a subsequent partner of that employer, i.e. you are a representative of an employer who you then get chosen to do something else, then there is precedent for that to not fit into the brand of the partner organisation, and therefore it does become difficult. I don't ever think Scotland are going to go down that route, but if it was a private sector organisation with private sector values and sort of, you could see it happening. You see it in sort of branding, all the kind of corporate branding nonsense that goes on. You do see these things happening. There's an image to maintain, and sadly, the Exeter image is or should be tarnished by what they've done.
I think the interesting thing is going to be when the players are outside the bubble of Exeter, because this really became a live issue, I think, in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement, that this people suddenly became aware of this, and Exeter Chiefs for Change, the fan group that are pushing for the change, kind of seized the opportunity really to try and make it, bring it to the fore and really campaign for it.
Yep.
I think now this is the first time you're going to have players outside of that setting and outside the control of Exeter's media. It'd be interesting, I think, to see whether the players now get asked about it in the international camps, because that will put pressure on Exeter. I think if you have Exeter players in the England camp and in the Scotland camp being asked about this issue, how do you feel about it? This has been discussed while you've been away. Have you talked about it as a group? That's going to put real pressure on the club to then, make the changes, because they don't have control over the players in those settings to kind of say, no, we don't want those questions asked of them. And we don't know what internal discussions there are in Exeter with the players. It doesn't look like anybody's gone the Sonny Bill Williams lengths of taping up sponsors or anything yet. But,
no, not yet. No. It's funny actually when you think about Sonny Bill. It's always, it strikes me as so, like, at the time it wasn't. I thought it was interesting, but I didn't think all that much of it. But now, like, just thinking about how big a statement that was, and how brave that is in some ways, to speak out in that way. It was magnificent. And I know he's got his critics for, some of the things he'd done earlier in his career, but by goodness, it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Yeah.
What's your hands in the ruck while I bring up another one?
No worries. I actually leads in quite nicely from the chat about racism. Or nicely, is that the right term to use? I don't know. Let's go with it anyway. So we touched earlier on the upcoming Scotland squad announcement, and we are going to have like WP before him, like others before them. We are going to have some new South African born players qualifying for Scotland and becoming Scotland internationals. And this has brought the usual knuckle draggers to the fore and has brought them out with the, I just want Scots born players. I just want people who drink Iron Brew all day and eat haggis and, down with that sort of thing. It is ridiculous. People need to really get over the idea. And I always remember going back to the argument, and it's something I've always said about this. I think you've said it as well. Many others have said it. If someone chooses to move to another country, move their whole life, and we're not talking moving from Glasgow to, well, you're based down south, Cammy. We're not talking about moving from Berwick to Leeds. We're not talking about moving from Glasgow to Cardiff. We're talking about moving thousands of miles across the world. Okay, moving. You can't just take a transit van and take all your gear with you. It is a much bigger deal, and you're committing to move your whole life across the world to a new employer. It's hard enough moving to a job in Glasgow from another job in Glasgow. You might not like your boss. You might not like your work colleagues. It might not work out. You might then struggle to get another job. It's 10 times harder for a professional sportsman. So to take that risk and be part of a culture and commit to being in a country for 3 years, as it is, that's the rules. and then to have the opportunity to represent that country, who have invested in you, who have taken you in and supported you. You know, Duhan van der Merwe was speaking at length about how if he didn't get an Edinburgh contract, he probably would have retired. He would have been lost to rugby, and for that he's grateful. So it's just like, it's almost like we have this entitlement that we believe that because we were by some biological quirk born in a certain hospital in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, that we are more Blue Thistle than someone who's chosen to move their family, move away from their friends, move away from their life, and come over and create a new life for themselves. They are just as Scottish, if not more so, than us, okay? And I see the knuckle dragging comments. They are also racist. They're xenophobic, they're racist, and they should be treated as such. It is ridiculous.
I mean, Pierre Schumann's a really good example of someone who's come in and absolutely from day one really bought into living in Scotland and absorbing the culture. He's set up a business now. It's he's a very good example of someone who's come in and really tried to engage and settle straight away. And WP Nell's talked about the fact he plays for his kids because his kids were born here. So that's
exactly.
These are big ties that bind people. And we've said it's not the 1800s. People move.
Yes,
people aren't just don't stay within the village they were always born in. People move, they cross borders. People's Sean Maitland's talking about the fact his granddad made Scotch pie, was a baker and made Scotch pies, and in New Zealand, and he used to stay up late at night watching his dad and his granddad watching games and stuff. And my kids are both born in Leeds. God, I could lose them to England any day. If the moment they get any influence at school, then I'm lost.
I've got a young nephew who's born down south, and he's much the same. He's playing rugby in one of the academies now, and his dad's a very proud Scotsman who has. We've talked at length about trying to encourage him to kind of get the blue on, but no, it's England shirt, and that's fine.
My kids love wearing the Scotland shirts at the minute. So they're both, I think, just because they've not got any other choice, but they enjoy wearing them. Whether that continues, I don't know. But I think although they live in England, they understand that's where I'm from, and my family's from, and that's nice, and that's. But at the same time, I feel at home in Leeds. As much as I feel at home in Berwick or Edinburgh and places I've lived before, it's not, we're a global, society now. It's not, we're not just, borders aren't what they were. They're not, there's no physical borders anymore. It's all paperwork and admin.
Yeah, it actually made me think a wee bit as well, because I was thinking about this in the context of Mr. Villa Colomo, or the lesser spotted Jail, who has left Glasgow without being cited, both in the rugby sense and in the physical sense. And it actually made me think. I was making a laugh and a joke about it last week, and we do this, but I've actually thought how it made me remember how hard it is to move your life, and we don't talk about that enough. But we mentioned obviously Pacific Islanders coming over and the different culture that we have in countries and stuff like that. But it's very difficult for all people to do this. And thinking about young guys, guys coming over here, obviously we've talked about the young South African schoolboys coming over to Scotland to continue their education and develop their rugby education. How difficult that is. Even with support, that's incredibly difficult, and it won't work for everyone. And players, even professional players in their mid-20s, early 30s, will struggle in new environments. And I think we need to really start to remember that it's not the players not choosing to come over and not settle, or not be part of the setup, or not be part of the culture. There's lots of reasons why they wouldn't do, but we should be really proud of those guys who do come over and who commit from day one. But there's the point you made about Sean Maitland, just to finish off, was, obviously he talked about his Scottish roots and his Scottish heritage. People always criticise people like him who say they wanted to be an All Black first, and when they found out they couldn't be an All Black, they chose Scotland as a second choice. They still had to do all the things, Sean Maitland moved to Glasgow. He became part of the Scottish rugby setup. He still has to travel thousands of miles from New Zealand to come and be a Scottish rugby player.
I think the other thing as well is, who amongst us would not choose to be an All Black before a Scottish rugby player if you had the option?
Yes, exactly. And you could argue what you want about the South African boys, but they've all been, from day one, they've been clear that they were coming over here to come and represent Scotland. Ollie Kebble said it, Schumann said it, Van der Merwe said it. Jaco didn't say it, but we were all surprised. We were too busy working out jingles for Jaco to figure out what was going on there. So
I think the thing is with these guys as well, it's like, one of the criticisms, particularly the schoolboy rugby, or even like a little bit of this, it takes a chance away from somebody else. And I think the answer is, they need to get better. That's the bottom line here. Is if we're important players, or players are coming over and qualifying on residency and they're getting in the team, it's because they're playing better, or they are better than what we have. And that's the answer. Is if you want to be selected for Scotland, you have to be the best, and that is going to include being better than people who qualify on residency. It's not right that you should get ahead of somebody because of where you were born, or whether your mother was born, or whatever. It's if you're good enough, you're Scottish enough, and we've always said that.
Exactly. It's back to the point we've made a number of times about professional sports is brutal, and people will get thrown on the scrap heap at a minute's notice, and that's a shame, and they need support with that, but that's the reality of it. It's one of these things. It's a touchy subject, isn't it? It's a strange one.
It is, but I think if you're good enough, you're Scottish enough. There's a couple of people asking about the rule. We could spend a long time on this, and we have in the past. And a couple of people asking whether residency rules should be changed, things like that. We'll get into this again, no doubt, next week when the squads are out.
Next week,
so we'll revisit this next week in a bit more detail, I think. But that the bottom line is, if you're good enough, you're Scottish enough for us, and that's where we. Final
point I would make on it, and a question to everyone who is criticising the idea of the saying those South African names don't sound Scottish enough, do they? If John Cooney, who recently was said that was approached by Scottish Rugby Union to come and play for Scotland, he's Joe qualified, could have represented Scotland. Had John Cooney decided to represent Scotland, how many of you would be speaking up? Exactly, It's racist. Go away.
On that note as well, this isn't a race. Anybody who hasn't seen, Ashton Hewitt, who plays for the Dragons, has been doing Black History Month and has written a really great piece for the Pro 14 website on racism in rugby, his own experiences, some of the stuff that the Dragons have done after Black Lives Matter, because it's Black History Month. So we're going to do our own little bit for that. So this is just to see us out. What we're going to try and do is shine a light on a Black or minority ethnic player from Scottish rugby history. We've got a problem on Twitch, John. I think Twitch have decided that we'll remove ourselves. We're going to remove ourselves from Twitch momentarily.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, we had someone saying I think there was a comment earlier on with someone suggesting it's gone now. But yes, there was a Russian spam bot giving us some
problem.
Anyway,
sass. So what we're going to do is shine a light every week throughout October on a Black minority ethnic player. This week it's J.G. Robertson, who was thought to be, and I've got the Scottish Sports History website to thank for this, the first Black rugby player.
Right, okay.
So he played for Royal High, and he played between 1871 and 1875. He played 46 games for Royal High, who were one of the founders of Scottish Rugby Union. He appeared in some team. We've got some team photos of him, but he's barely mentioned in Scottish sports history. He is the son of Daniel Robertson, a Perthshire-born surgeon who'd gone to Gambia in 1834 and rose to become a colonial secretary. Daniel Robertson devoted his entire working life to Gambia and spent 30 years there before retiring. There's no record of him marrying, and the assumption must be that he had a relationship with a Gambian woman, which produced two sons. James George Robertson was born 1854 in Bathurst, Gambia, and his younger brother John 3 years later. He sent to Scotland for his education, boarded in Crieff, and then eventually attended Madras College from 1866 to 70 and St Andrews. Went to Edinburgh University, and it's thought that's when he started playing rugby. He had a couple of trials for Scotland. I know that's on the Royal High website, and eventually settled down in England. Played for Darlington for a time, as well as captain North Durham club, which was based in Gateshead from 1879 to 1882. Played for Darlington, married Emily in Newcastle in 1879, had 3 sons and a daughter. And then after that, they ended up moving down south. So that is J.G. Robertson, the first black player to play rugby, thought to be anyway.
Yep.
So we'll pick up another name next week. So if you want to know more about him, I'll pop the link in the blog article post.
Yep.
To go with this.
Sounds really interesting.
If you've got anyone you want to nominate for Black History Month player that we're going to feature at the end of every podcast, then do let us know, and we'll hope to feature them. We've got a wee list going.
Yep.
So do let us know. For the meantime, though, John and I are going to shoot off and record a wee podcast extra for the Patreons.
Yep.
But for this week, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from John.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.